Hello, listeners from Roy Damari Vinsam. So, where are my thoughts and therefore my ramblings taking me on this day? And the answer is a topic called gender marketing. Now, as many of you know, I do teach online and meeting my students occasionally at Robert Kennedy College. And I run a course on marketing, which is reasonably successful. I have some insight into it as a marketing consultant, but on industrial products over many decades. And a lot of marketing today is more about consumer products, about which I have less experience, but which I can still talk with some sense. Many things have, of course, changed over the years that I've been involved in marketing, including, rather obviously, the internet and the role of the so-called social media in promoting products and getting people to become associated with a product or a service and things like that. But there's a topic which one of my lady students raised with me, which was kind of new to me and quite an eye-opener, and that is that marketing can be aimed at women or at men, but sometimes both, and there are many questions about that. Now, many products are so obviously different between those that are needed by men and for women that one doesn't even think twice about the advertisements you see for cosmetics, which are quite different from for women and for men. In fact, for men, cosmetics is not really much of a product, although I think the cosmetic manufacturers would like to change that situation. Clothing is obviously different, personal hygiene needs is different, and so on. Yet sometimes the same product can be marketed differently to men from the way it is marketed to women. And the classic example of this, and it's worth spending a moment thinking about it, is the razor. And Gillette is the master of bringing out the difference. Recently, I was actually the guest of a lady and I'd forgotten my razor. So she lent me hers. And I found it was a very useful razor. It worked perfectly. In fact, looking at it more closely, I realized that it was actually an identical product to my normal razors, except two things. Its color was different. It was a light blue versus the dark blue, and it was much more rounded in shape than the more bluntly rectangular male throwaway razor. The advertising campaigns and even the websites for men's and women's razors are different. The men's razors are usually presented as sporty and dynamic. A dominant sports star might appear in commercials and advertising campaigns, whereas the feminine counterpart will emphasize the razor's skin-enhancing properties and will promote shaving as part of a luxurious and indulgent skincare routine. So the company has cleverly managed to create one product with two successful product lines, in which both the product design and the marketing are adapted for the two sexes. And there are many other examples of products which are the same product but with a separate line for male and female. Certainly this covers cars, alcoholic drinks, to some extent electronics and technology, and such things as cosmetics, of course, shaving foam and aftershave, both of which could be used by both sexes but are really quite different one from the other. Now, one thing I have learned from these recent studies I've made and the reports presented to me by my own students is that the whole purchasing method of men, the whole shopping method of men and of women are very different. Typically, and I have to say it's always typically, not every time, a man will decide what he wants, will look out for something that fulfills that need, meets his wants, and then buy it. It's a linear process from determining what he needs in general to actually purchasing the product. In contrast, a woman is much more likely to go through a reiterative process where she may find something that suits, but still won't buy it because she wants to go back over, perhaps several times, to find something that meets the basic needs and all sorts of secondary needs, if it's clothing, for example, colour match with what she already has, until finally she moves beyond just meeting the need and getting precisely what she wants. But it takes time, which may explain why you see so many men bored out of their minds when their female partners are shopping. In fact, the best thing to do is, of course, go off and do your own thing while the women spend time looking for their clothing or their perfume or whatever. Research tells us that women like what might be called a cosy shopping environment where they can wander and look at different things and not be hassled. And might decide, therefore, to buy something which they didn't even come into the shop to buy. Whereas, in general, and I have to keep stressing this is typical but not universal, men just want one thing, to get what they want and then get out of there. Now, let's take a step backwards. When it comes to gender, stereotypes are drilled into us from birth, leading us to form cliched opinions, such as men all like cars and sports, while women like shopping and reality TV. There is at least a nugget of truth in these stereotypes that has not escaped the notice of advertisers, and they exploit these conventions to capitalize on them. And it's no coincidence that car commercials are aired during football games, or that cosmetics commercials are played and repeated during something like the next top model. Now, things are changing quietly, steadily, with regard to stereotyping. And so we have things like advertising and promotion for DIY products, which are suitable also for women, which might involve women using the tools. In fact, there is even a company which I'm vaguely associated with, which is called Tom Tools. It's actually a company in America that actually makes tools specifically for women. Well, you might ask, well, what tools are they? I don't really know. I guess it's simpler to use, requires less strength, things like that. The point to stress is that DIY can be done by women just as easily as by men, and that products and promotion can now address both genders completely, and not just men, which would be stereotyping men. In contrast, food has always been aimed at women and is now also aimed at men who might want to cook by themselves anyway, although the leading chefs are usually men anyway. That happens to be a professional thing rather than a preconceived stereotype. Gender marketing is an incredibly complex field. And as such, those who fail to grasp the different interests and needs of men and women may miss the mark with their campaigns and remain unsuccessful. Calling upon gender marketing is most appropriate where the requirements of male and female consumers are quite different from each other. If you can meet these needs well, then you expand your customer base without falling into the traps of excessive and limiting stereotyping. Isn't that really the point? Neither men nor women need to be limited in what they may do in life, where society lets them do something in life. We don't need limits like that, not because of our gender in any case. Let me finish with an anecdote about my own experience going back many decades to when I was at school. And it shows the distance I personally have come since those days, 50, 60 years ago. I was quite a whiz kid with the slide rule. This was long before electronics gave us calculators and so on. And to master a slide rule in the 50s, 60s, even early 70s was enormously advantageous when it came to making calculations. And at business school, for example, where I would be able to use my slide rule when others had to use extremely expensive, if they could afford it, calculators, I found a slide rule absolutely wonderful. I could do growth rates and things like that on fifth roots when nobody had any idea how to do that. Anyway, I once showed, I think I was about 17, a student, a girl student from our sister school, how to use a slide rule. And she mastered it pretty well straight away. Now, that impressed me very much. In fact, what went through my mind was something like, a girl can master a slide rule. How amazing. I'd never have thought it. Now, today I can say that with both a sense of apology and shame, because it was a ridiculous thing to say, but it was the way we boys, we men thought in those days many decades ago. I'm glad to put that behind me. I really am. And just see women as equal partners to men, equally able to men in many regards, better in some of them also. Anyway, that's my progress. I hope my male listeners also can think of progress they've made in their attitudes to women, and that may, if they're involved in marketing, come right through into the way they promote their products or their services or run advertising campaigns, if that is one of their activities. I'll speak to you again next week on a subject I've no idea what it will be yet.